Well, good morning. Happy Thursday to you. It's Thursday the 13th of November. It's actually a beautiful morning out this morning. It's not windy. It's been windy over the past couple days, and there's clouds that have moved in overnight. So there's a little bit of heat that's radiating from the earth and it's being trapped inside. I think all week it's been like in the low 40s, but today it was in the mid 60s. So it's actually quite a beautiful day. I'm still cold. That's why I'm wearing this because I'm always cold in the morning. I'm always cold always. It's just the story of my life. It's a good thing I live in Arizona, but it's probably thinned out my blood. And I feel a lot of I feel sadness for people that live in Arizona that are hot all the time. There are people like that. They just run hot, and Arizona is not. At least Southern Arizona. It's better than Phoenix, I will tell you that, but it's still hot. These are the people that should live in Alaska or Ontario or the North Pole or something like that, where they're really, truly happy. I have a son who his whole life, when he lived here in Tucson, just was always hot all the time. He wanted to live in Alaska, and now he's living in Minnesota. I think he's living his best life. I could not live where he lives. And then I understand we're going to get some rain on Friday and Saturday and Sunday and Monday and Tuesday, and it's going to be likely a cold rain. I have no idea if it's going to be snow. It's too early in the season for snow, but it's not really because it's snowing in Colorado or Chicago already, and they have to deal with that. Let's see. We have a couple birthdays to go through. One is today is the 13th, so tomorrow is Pam Beals and Kathy Wakefield. Happy birthday to both of you. And then on Sunday is Ron Eshelman. So if you know them, you're welcome to say happy birthday to them. They're having a great birthday. And then yesterday, I found out whose birthday was it yesterday? Dawn had a birthday yesterday. So happy birthday. I didn't know that. It wasn't on my list of birthdays. So sorry about that. Just kind of a housekeeping. We will meet next week, Monday through Thursday, and then the following week, Monday through Thursday, I'm gone to Chicago, and then I'll be back the following week. What is that, December 1st or 2nd or whatever that is? I'll be back. But just 1 week off, to go see my kids in Chicago. And I'm excited about that. All right, let's get into our study. We've been talking about yesterday or this whole week. We've been talking about sins that were intentional and sins that were unintentional, and there was also a question about sins of omission and sins of commission. Sins of commission are the things that you do that God doesn't want you to do. Sins of omission are things that you should be doing that that you're not doing. So it's not really the sin of unintentional and purposeful, because you can intentionally not do something that God's told you to do. And you can unintentionally do something that you've done, the sin of commission, something that you did, but it was an accident. It was an unintentional accident. It's like, how could you unintentionally do something? Well, obviously, if you touched a dead body and you didn't know it was dead, or something that's forbidden in Scripture, and you didn't quite know if it was against God's law. In the United States, you can commit a crime and not even how many crimes are on the book of Arizona? Like you can't touch a donkey on Sunday or something. I mean, there's lots of weird rules out of there that were put in place at one point, but 100 years later, they have no no bearing on a new society. So that would be a sin of unintentional commission, where you actually do something and you didn't know it was illegal. Although that doesn't, just because, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. So everybody has to know what the law is, or else they'll be ignorant of the law. All right. Sorry. So that's the difference between omission and commission. But we were looking at intentional and unintentional. And they are all different ways of thinking about the law, because God puts the law down into place and he expects it to be followed. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because we're going to find out that sometimes people violate God's law. And what do you do? So let's get into our study. Hopefully this will work. I think I did set it up. This is Numbers 15:32. And while the Israelites were in the wilderness, a man was found gathering wood on a Sabbath day. And those who found him gathering wood brought him to Moses and Aaron and the whole assembly. And they kept him in custody because it was not clear what should be done to him. And then the Lord said to Moses, "This man must die. The whole assembly must stone him outside the camp." So the assembly took him outside the camp and stoned him to death as the Lord commanded Moses. Now this sounds really harsh, doesn't it? That a person, for the simple crime of gathering firewood, doing work on the Sabbath. And we know that the Sabbath day is God's day of rest. He insists that we rest. And so they find this man gathering firewood on a Sabbath, and he's put to death. Now, let's just talk about the circumstances behind this. It could be that the man was lazy, that he should have been collecting the firewood the other 6 days of the week, so that when it came to Sunday or Saturday, this would be a Saturday, Friday night to Saturday night, and he didn't have fire, and he needed wood for the fire, that the wood was already available. And the fact that he didn't plan ahead to get firewood means that he had to go out he either had to, one, be cold, or two, go out and collect firewood. And the man chose to not collect the firewood prior to the Sabbath. And then on the Sabbath, maybe he saw his kids cold, his wife cold, whoever was in his assembly cold, and he said, "I'm going to go risk a punishment to go out and collect firewood." So he goes out and collects firewood. And it is quite possible that other people in the community have gone out and done this also. And so he looked around and said, well, other people have done it, so I'm going to do it also. And that's not an excuse for the law either. As your mother told you probably 100 times, if everybody was jumping off a cliff, would you jump off a cliff too? And the answer is no. We don't go along with what other people are doing. We go along with what is commanded or told of us, what is the right thing to do. Even if everybody else is doing the wrong thing, we're called to do the right thing. So the people see the guy out collecting firewood, and they bring him to Moses and Aaron. And Moses asks God, "What should I do with this guy?" And God says, "Put him to death." And that seems like such a harsh punishment for going out and collecting firewood. And the problem is that once God gives a command, he expects the command to be followed, period. And if you don't do what God tells you to do, then there has to be a punishment. And the punishment for doing work on the Sabbath is death, according to God, at least for this guy. And so Moses puts him out to the camp, and the whole entire camp stones him to death. It's not like Moses putting him to death or Aaron taking a sword and running it through his heart or something like that. This is the whole community taking him out outside the camp and killing him. And on its face value, it seems like a very, very, very horrible punishment. But a couple things here. First of all, we don't know anything about this guy. It is quite possible that he has done this over and over and over again, and the whole campus kind of turned a blind eye to it. It could be, I'm saying could because we don't know this guy. It could be that the guy was constantly doing things that were against God's law. It could have been that he was a person that, I don't want to say irredeemable, but a person that was always going against the grain, always testing the limits. Maybe he had anger issues. Maybe he wasn't kind. He wasn't compassionate. He didn't have any. I mean, we just don't know anything about the guy. But we do know that in this particular instance, Moses said we have to stone him, and the whole community came together and stoned him. And being a part of that, they were able then to go back to their children and say, we just saw a person who collected firewood on Sunday, and we killed him. So don't do work on Sunday. It seems like a horrible, horrible, horrible punishment. But it also is true that the story of this punishment is probably strong enough to where nobody will work on the Sabbath for a very, very long time, because the stories will be told for generations about how this gentleman collected firewood on a Sabbath and that the punishment was death. And just the fear of the punishment of death is going to keep the people in line to not do work on the Sabbath. We have this vision or this image of the Old Testament that there were people, hundreds, thousands of people going out and collecting firewood on Sunday, and they all get stoned to death. But it doesn't take a whole bunch of people to collect firewood. All it takes is one person. And at God's choosing, and at Moses' choosing, he says, you violated the Sabbath. It's been brought to my attention. I have to do something, and the punishment is stoning. So we take him out and we stone him. And he's made an example for the whole community. Do not do this on a Sunday. We, even today, do the same thing. There will be times where a judge will look at the crime and say, in this particular instance, we need to make an example of this person because they violated a very severe law. And so we're going to, quote unquote, throw the book at them. And when you do that, it is a deterrent for future crime. We think that law and punishment, law and sentencing is only on a case-by-case basis, but it's not. It's something that runs deep through the whole society. And there are times when judges will have the maximum punishment because they don't want this thing to happen again. In the case of, this is 2024, at the last election in 2023, would that be a year ago? No, yeah, 2024. Or was it, no, 2020, in the election of 2020. There were a bunch of people who went into the Capitol, and then those people were not hunted down. The FBI located them, and the punishment was that some of them, I think 4 years later, some of them are still in prison for the crime of entering into the Capitol building during a riot. And it seems like, I mean, if you just look at it at its face value, you say that seems like overreach. But on the flip side, the purpose of this throwing the book at these people was to prevent a crime, to prevent this thing happening in the future. And I'm not going to get into the politics, but that seems to me like a time where the judicial system went maybe above a normal punishment because they wanted to make an example and not have that happen again. There are times in our community when these types of things happen, and they're made not that the main purpose of it is to deter future crime. You know, it's interesting. In other societies, I understand that this may strike you as interesting, but in Arab communities, a Sharia law is different than the Judeo-Christian law. Sharia law, my understanding is that if you steal, that your hand gets cut off. And that also seems like a very, very severe punishment, not to be able to use your hand. But the truth is that every time somebody looks at you, they will be reminded that that there is a punishment for the crime of stealing. And so we're not going to steal. And it seems like it's an over-the-top punishment for let's say somebody steals a loaf of bread because they're hungry. Well, we understand that you're hungry, but we cannot exist as a society if everyone steals. So we have to put an end to it. So we're going to make an example of you, and we're going to cut off your hand. And that example will live among us to show the other people that you should not steal. And the other interesting side impact of that is that if we find somebody stealing, oftentimes we'll put them in jail or we'll put them in prison for a period of time, for a year, 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years, or whatever it is. But there's a cost associated with that. And so that's a huge cost to society. And the second thing is it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. We don't see the people in prison. And since most of us aren't at the sentencing and we don't follow those things, we just don't really see it. And yet it's something that should be visible to keep everybody on task with the law, to understand that there is a punishment, because it only takes one example. This is the only one that we see of somebody collecting firewood on a Sabbath or doing any work on the Sabbath. And the fact that he was stoned really, really, really did bring the people in line to not do work on the Sabbath. And this story can be told from generation to generation to generation until people forget about it, which they do. We find in once they reach the promised land, the people will do this, and the leaders won't do anything about it. And I guess that's another point to be made, is that if you are a leader of a community and you see something happen that's violating the law, it seems cruel and it seems harsh. But unfortunately, if you are the leader and there is a law on the books, you are required to either get that law changed or to enforce the law. You cannot have anarchy. The whole purpose of coming together in a community with laws, we always forget about this, but any law that's passed, the upside is that, if people follow the law, great. But the downside is that at some point somebody has to, even when it's not convenient, enforce the law. Even Pontius Pilate, when Jesus came before him, he was terrified of Jesus because Jesus wasn't afraid of Pilate. Pilate could see it in Jesus' eyes. But Pilate, at some level, his whole role in being there in the Roman Empire was because he was to enforce the Roman law. And unfortunately, this is, if sometimes that looks like you've got a brutal person at the top enforcing laws. But the fact is that the person at the top is only enforcing the laws that are in place. And that's their job, is the executive branch or the judicial branch or whatever. I guess this would be the judicial branch, but at some level, the executive is also. But, well, all three are involved, right? But at some level, enforcing the law has to be done, period. I guess that is the executive branch. The executive branch enforces the law. That's the whole purpose of the executive branch. One of their things is to enforce all laws that are put into place. And if you don't enforce laws, then you have anarchy. And if you have anarchy, people are harmed, tremendously harmed. All right. So you look at history of people who are strong leaders of history. And one of the things you will note about them is that even when it wasn't convenient or made them look bad, they enforced the law, period. And yes, sometimes they did kill people for mutiny if they were, at a time of war. All sorts of things that they did, they hung people. And we look back here with our 21st century worldview and we say how horrible. But we forget that unless laws are enforced at some level, you get anarchy, and a society cannot move forward without anarchy. When there's anarchy, there has to be somebody at the top enforcing the law, and it is a very, very, I will say, you look back at, because I think wasn't it Abraham Lincoln that had to make sure that somebody was killed from. I can't remember, but everybody thinks of Abraham Lincoln as being this loving, kind person that emancipated the slaves. But at some level, he was also a leader that understood that he was tasked with enforcing the law. And even during the Civil War, he did some things that we look back today and we forget about. But it's true. He suspended the writ of habeas corpus or whatever. We don't think about those things. All right. And how do I know that this is all about the law and perception? It's because of what shows up next in our reading on verse 37. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, throughout the generations to come, you are to make tassels on the corners of your garments with a blue cord on each tassel. You will have these tassels to look at, and so you will remember all the commands of the Lord, that you may obey them and not prostitute yourselves by chasing after the lusts of your own hearts and eyes. Then you will remember to obey all my commands, and you'll be consecrated to your God. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God." So right after this, made an example, God tells Moses, "Oh, by the way, put tassels on your garments. And every time you see those tassels, I want you to be reminded of my law, because I don't want you to go out and collect firewood on a Saturday, on the Sabbath. I want you to remember every single one of my laws. And the best way to do that is to put them as tassels on your clothing." And they still do this today. Here's a picture of an Orthodox Jew man wearing a woolen talit katan under his vest waistcoat, but you can see the tassels in there, and they've got the blue cords. And these are still worn by Jews today as a reminder of God's law. As a matter of fact, if you see tassels on any garments, you think that they're there as decorative purposes, but they have their roots back in Orthodox Judaism, where God told him to put tassels on the garments. And today they might also serve function of that the hem of the garment isn't fraying or something like that, but it all goes back to this root, because we should remember God's law, period. It should be written on our foreheads and on our hearts and on our sleeves and the tassels. The people need to constantly be reminded of God's law so that they don't break God's law. And at some level, whoever's in charge, whether it's Moses or Joshua or somebody else, King David, part of their job is to make sure the laws are enforced. And it only takes one person. You only have to stone one person to keep the people in line. Anyway, it's not like, they were stoning 10 people a day for doing this. We see all of the Old Testament laws and we say that's a harsh punishment. We think, man, there are just people left and right doing these things. No, not really. It only took one. And then the stories of that would pass down from generation to generation. And people would be kept in line. All right. I think we'll leave it there. And let's close in prayer. Gracious God, thank you for this day. Thank you for the little warmer weather. And over the weekend, if it rains, we thank you for that too. Until we meet again, keep us in your grace. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, let me go over here to see if there's anything I need to address. In that law, the Islamic world, if you steal, it is the right hand that is cut off, so you cannot eat. As they eat with the right hand, people have nothing to do with them. It is a death sentence, but it takes time. Wow. Yeah, it is a beautiful morning. Yeah. So thanks for that. I appreciate it. All right. So that is it for today. Go outside. It looks like it's partially cloudy as I look outside, so that's good. And hope you have a great day, and we'll see you on Monday. Take care. Bye.